right, so this week you all are going to get to practice the fourth and final type of FRQ that you are going to see on the AP exam. So before I go over that, I wanted to make sure that you are aware that there is an FRQ resources tab on the Google Classroom. So you can see the different examples. You can pull up the slides that explain the different types of questions, as well as the task verbs. You can look at tips. Okay, and because we're doing a Supreme Court FRQ this week, I've also provided an example from the AP exam in 2018. So you can see the question, you can see the scoring guide, and you can also look at some examples of a good response and a not so good response. And it is going to explain to you why some responses received higher scores than other responses. So I would really recommend checking out these FRQ examples before you start writing yours. All right, so what is the Supreme Court comparison, FRQ? So these types of questions are going to present you with a description of a non-required Supreme Court case and its holding. Okay, so this question is going to give you a little paragraph summary of a Supreme Court case that you probably aren't familiar with. So you are going to be asked to identify similarities and differences between that case provided to you in the prompt and then one of the cases that you are required to know for the AP exam. So a lot of those cases we discovered in the Civil Liberties Unit or discussed in the Civil Liberties Unit. We talked about Brown v. Board during the Civil Rights Unit. That's a required case. You can also go to my class website or on Google Classroom under class information and see which cases that you're required to know. So you're going to describe the reasoning of the case presented or explain the similarities and differences between the two cases. So essentially what this type of question is going to ask you to do is compare and contrast a non-required case with a required case. It's measuring to see how much you know about the required case in the prompt. So there are some tips if you want to look at the FRQ tips. So while answering the directive, especially if it asks you to identify or describe, restate the exact words of the prompt to answer in a full sentence. When asked about case facts, write specific background facts that link to both case names, but you do not have to reference the ruling. Explain why these facts link to a similarity and difference in the rulings as directed in the prompt by summarizing the rulings that link to both case names. To any answer of a prompt directing to explain should include a statement of causation that uses the word because. While answering the directive that's asking you to describe or explain, restate the exact words of the prompt to answer in full sentences. And just make sure that you are elaborating when you're writing these. Wrong or vague information can't hurt your points, but elaboration can help get you points if your initial writing is kind of iffy. So these are just some tips to keep in mind as you start writing this. So let's look at the prompt that you are going to be responding to. It says, the Seattle School District operated a school choice program that allowed parents to choose the high school they wanted their children to attend. Because some schools were much more popular than others were, and the school system wanted to make sure that their schools had a diverse student body, it used race as one of the tiebreakers when deciding who would get to attend the schools in most demand. In Parents Involved in Community Schools v. Seattle from 2007, the United States Supreme Court found that the school district was using race in an unconstitutional manner in its assignment plan. The decision was a 5-4 split on the court, with both sides claiming that their position was the truest precedent set in Brown v. Board of Education. So that is your required case, Brown v. Board of Education. So you're taking this information about Parents Involved in Community Schools v. Seattle, and you're going to be comparing it with Brown v. Board of Education. So part A, identify the clause of the 14th Amendment that is most relevant to Brown v. Board of Education and Parents Involved in Community Schools v. Seattle. Okay, so you're going to have to go back, consider Brown v. Board. What clause of the 14th Amendment was that case decided on? And there you will put blank clause of the 14th Amendment is most relevant to these cases. For part B, Explain the similarity in the facts between Brown v. Board of Education and parents involved in community schools v. Seattle that led to similar holdings in both cases. Okay, so we know how the court ruled, okay, that race was being used in an unconstitutional manner. So you're going to compare the facts between the two that led to those similar rulings. And then in Part C, justices on the Supreme Court take seriously their duty to interpret laws and the Constitution as fairly and accurately as possible. Despite this, explain how sharp disagreements can occur on the Supreme Court about how race can be used in school assignment plans. So in Part C, you're really going to have to kind of think back to the Judiciary Unit, where we talked about the different approaches justices can take when they're trying to interpret the Constitution. So when you consider that, you'll be able to explain how disagreements can sometimes occur on the Supreme Court. So that just kind of breaks down this type of question. It's a little different than some of the others that we have done. So again, make sure that if you have any questions or if you feel like you need some clarification, go back to these FRQ resources, look through them. I definitely recommend looking at the examples here from the 2018 exam. And if you have any questions, please let me know.